Hello and welcome to another episode of Hearing in Colour with Matt Simon. This podcast explores the connection between creativity, synesthesia and spirituality. Synesthesia is a condition where it's a cross-wiring of the senses, so when I listen to music I see colours. Alright, so welcome back. We've got the mighty Steve Ling returning. Steve has had quite a saga recording one of his albums, and we're going to talk about that today. And I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to interrupt occasionally and ask questions if something seems a bit unlikely, or trying to guess what listeners might be thinking if there's anything that needs to be clarified. And Steve, you requested that I didn't listen to the album before we did this because I haven't heard it. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. So just if I thought it might be interesting, the type of questions that someone asks before they know what any of the songs are, as opposed to once you've heard them once or twice maybe, and actually then you've got more different questions to ask. So I thought that might be an interesting listen back. We'll do the before and afterwards.
Okay, cool. So this album it's been completed now, but has it not been released?
Well, yes. I can show you an actual copy of it through the camera. So yeah, I have the CDs now, and it is officially completed. But now I'm in between the processes of completing the work and getting the work out there.
And so this album was quite expensive, maybe not in terms of like Rihanna albums expensive, but on a local level you spent like a fair amount on this. You have to go into the exact figures if you want to or not. It took quite a long time, so that's what's quite interesting for this, because the creative process varies for everyone. I've had releases that have taken different amounts of time, but this has been quite an epic for you. So yeah, where do you want to start?
I mean, well, I always kind of thought about it, having watched so many episodes of Grand Designs, building the houses and stuff, and so many clients start off with an idea of how much money they want to spend and how long it's going to take. And that's where that kind of comparison just snowballed for me. And that's like why I think the album that I've made has got so many parallels with like making and building a house, in that way, that if the most simple one at least being that I overshot my budget and I overshot my time allowance as well, quite considerably. So I have no problem sharing the sort of exact figures sort of thing. Is that I, back in 2013, 2014, I had set aside £2,000. That was my budget. I don't really know what I was expecting for £2,000, but you got to put some flag in the sand.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, like you, for a home recording budget, you could potentially do that yourself, because if you're recording on a computer yourself, you can maybe produce it yourself, and things like artwork, and you can do things. That does sound maybe a lot for some people, but for an album, that is quite cheap and achievable. So
It's extremely cheap, but from someone, I suppose, not used to working with, I suppose, professional mix engineers or mastering engineers at this point, then you don't know how much anything costs. All you know is how much like a wedding guy gets paid on Saturday night to play guitar. So it seemed like, all right, I guess my original idea was I could pay the drummer a few £100 to help, to if I worked with him, to help set up the studio and understand the whole process. So I was helping him, so it wasn't really that like he charged me as such, but I gave him like a sort of thank you token gift present of like a proper nice Dyson fan for his studio,
right.
like about 300 quid, something like that. And I spent a week with him setting up the mics, putting them down, like one half term, just so I was giving my time to help him learn how to mic drums up in the return for him recording the drums for me.
And was that at your place or his place?
That was at his studio. I was
Right.
quite fortunate that he owned a sort of teaching space where he got 2 drum kits set up, and was quite easy enough to be able to put the mics up and put it into his laptop. And like, as you know, and I'm sure most people know, recording drums just a very tricky art.
It's lots of instruments at once, isn't it?
Yeah,
Different
and you need
parts.
to know a little bit about what you're doing. And so, for instance, like one of the days that I was there, we tried a whole load of different mics to see if there's any differences. Like one of the stories that was quite memorable for me was about the tom mics. He bought some, what do you call them, MD421s, I think they call them. I don't know what the brand is. I'm not really up on the mics and that. But they were supposed to be really good vintage Tom mics, 3 of them. And we tried the Tom on its own against like a different mic. And we're listening back to the recordings going, they both sound exactly the same. Why is this supposed to be the better mic than the others? And then you put all of the mics up and you hear the Tom in isolation. And all of a sudden this mic has like a really small catchment area, and that's why it's good for Tom mics or what have you. Like, now I see it. So we were learning a lot on the go, which means that it wasn't like the drums weren't done in like sort of 4 days where the kit was mic'd one day and then it stayed mic'd for all the days. We just had to do like as much as we could in 3 hours, break it all down, come back 3 weeks later, set it all up again, do as much as we could, break it all down, and then keep going for weeks and weeks and weeks until we'd covered everything essentially.
Because normally what you do, because you're paying someone else for the time, and like you're often like doing it on mates rates, so to sort of like get the most value both sides, normally you'd maybe set aside a couple of days, someone would have a setup, and then you do a bit of prep beforehand and then run through some takes and then take the files. So that's what I've done with Martin Griffith has done a lot of my Indigo stuff. So set aside like a couple of days, and then or one can't remember what song it was, or a couple, like someone had a studio, so I paid him for that time, paid Martin for the time he was there, and the mics were done. So it's, you try and get it all done in a space of a few days normally.
Yeah, and I think I saw a problem with that because, well, you
get
know
a
me
consistent
personally.
sound as well, because even if you have the same mics in the same room and same equipment, if you set them up the next day, it might sound a bit different.
It sounded completely different, and we did slightly different mic setups for different tracks. Like some of the tracks had 2 snare top mics and 1 snare bottom. Some of them were set up a lot better than others. So when it got to mixing it, we found out that there was so much hi-hat spill in the snare mic that essentially we didn't use the hi-hat mic. We just used the snare mic, and that was enough for the hi-hats as well, because it was recorded so badly, you know.
And if you have the same recording sound on each track, if you're using like a metal album, for example, where the drums actually sound quite consistent, you can have the same processing on each of the audio files for each different song you're doing. So that saves more time as well, because you can EQ it all, get that sounding good, and then kind of copy and paste those settings into the next project. So again, that will save time.
Yeah, the only problem again with that would be that a lot of the tracks on my album are just layered so differently. It's not like maybe like a rock band or a heavier band like, I don't know, Deftones or Korn or something, where you've always got the same lineup and they're kind of playing through the same sort of sounds, like heavy distorted all the time or what have you. But I've got tracks that there's one track that is acoustic guitar, electric guitars, plural, bass, drums, lead vocals and backing vocals. And in the vocal channels there are, well, the Logic came up to tell me you've used all the available tracks. There are only 293 tracks you can record on.
I think my record is about 80.
Yeah, well, but this is where I had to learn how to kind of batch record and start doing takes, so that I had one track to represent each individual different part. If it's like there's a 4-part harmony, the top part, the bottom part, or whatever. And then there might be like so many takes within that. So actually the amount that I recorded was insane compared to how many I actually used. But that's one of the tracks. It's got like, I don't know, nearly 300 lines of backing vocals in it. But one of the tracks on it has literally just got 1 acoustic guitar and 1 vocal, a bit like More Than Words. That was kind of the modeling of one of the tracks. So it kind of goes from a full band right the way down to 1 guy and 1 voice sort of thing.
And this is the thing with digital recording, is that you can have lots of different takes and lots of different tracks, and then be switching between them and like not make a decision. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you've got all those options, but at some point you need to just like cut them down and say, right, we're going to use that part, and then just work more practically. But it's with digital recording, it's never ever finished, is it? Like you can always do more, or I'll keep that one because I might use it for later, but you might not.
Well, I think there's an interesting point to be made there. I'll keep that one because I might need it for later. It's a tricky one. Like if it's not right when it goes in, there's a lot of time I've found that it's like a lot of the time it didn't come back that I used it later. With comping drums, I think that's something completely different. But with vocals and guitar, I guess with that being like mine and yours, like main instruments as well, I
Yeah.
would probably be a bit more picky with that and want to make sure you've played it all in one take perfectly as much as possible, I would have thought.
You've also harmonized those, like you don't generally harmonize bass and things as well, so you might
Yeah,
automatically have
true.
more guitar parts anyway. And then I generally myself do maybe like three bass takes and then comp together bits of those, but I wouldn't normally have any more than three bass on a
Well,
track.
interesting story surrounding the bass lines. Most of the bass lines were the first take that I picked up the bass, plugged it in, and sound checked the level, and it's like, right, hit the record, go. Wow, all right, that was a good take. Cool, we'll do that. It's like, for some reason, I've found that the more takes you do, especially on an instrument, the worse you get. Like, I mean,
Yeah, can happen. Yeah,
in terms of like the way it sounds listening back to it, it might be a bit rough around the edges and a bit like ooh, just about in time on the first take. But usually there's so much more expression and twiddly bits and little bits that you're trying that maybe you wouldn't do if you were, recording on someone else's CD or something. But when you're doing your own thing, you're
yeah.
just like, oh, I'll just put this little bit in because it might be funny. So I had the track one on the album, Pretty Sweet. I had to re-record the bass line because there was some, I don't know, some problem with the sound. It was like a technical problem, not really like a performance problem as such, that wouldn't go away in mixing. So I had to re-record the bass. Problem was that bass line was exactly that situation where I just picked it up, played it along, bosh, done. There were two or three mistakes in there, rhythmically and melodically as well, which I was surprised that those got past the producer's ears, that they weren't mistakes to him. They were just notes. Whereas I heard them as errors, if you know what I mean.
Is that something you could have tweaked on the computer, like with auto tune or something?
Well, but
Because
this was the point, is that I had to relearn the take as it was as I performed it. So I
right.
transcribed it and I had to transcribe the errors and I had to forcefully remember to play the errors. And the first time I played it in, when I originally wrote the bass or played in the bass line, it took me one take. It took me 4 minutes maybe, but I did 65 takes to get that bass line.
I've only ever done that much for guitar solos. Yeah.
It's funny because, like, yet again, like something to do with the bass as well. Like the producer Bill, while we were mixing it, he just sort of really like the bass player in this band. I want to be the bass player in this band, and I agreed with him. I said I think the bass lines are most of the bass lines for me make the album. They make the song. There's so much more interest in the bass line than there is in a lot of what the guitars are doing, which is a weird thing to say because lead guitar is like my main instrument, but I find there's a lot more interest in the drums and the bass for me.
The bass is a rhythm instrument, or the bass guitar is, and it has so much impact into the groove and the momentum of the piece, more so than the guitars do. So it's really a structural point, and it can drastically change the feel and the sound of the song. So
Yeah, and
it's really underrated.
a nerdy little thing that I like about bass is, especially growing up as someone who was very into heavy music and down tuning and five string and tuned down to E flat or D, low B flat, low A, all that sort of stuff. But as I've kind of got older, I really like to hear bass played in its high range, like really high up the neck. Um, I've noticed it in pop music as a trend, more so when I was playing with I wrote songs with a female singer on acoustic guitar, like folky pop songs and stuff. That's when I first kind of encountered it, was that girls tend to use higher bass notes than boys, or men and women, shall we say.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, so like I'd noticed that in pop music, it might be, let's say you're on a four-string bass, you're playing E on the A string at the seventh fret, and you want to go to A. Now, most men would go down to the fifth fret of the E string and play the low A. But when I played the high A, she seemed to like that better, or there's the higher bass note going up to the 12th fret on the A string rather than that low thing. I don't know whether that's a mirror of like women having a higher voice range than a men.
Did spring to
Um,
mind? Yeah.
it's a tenuous link. I'm not suggesting that that's 100% of the time how it is, but I've noticed that sometimes female pop songs tend to highlight and prefer, I suppose, the higher bass notes than the chunky low bass notes. So I thought that then, in a way, translates to me that if I want to create more of a feminine mood, I play higher. If you want to create more of a masculine mood, I play lower. I don't know why. I just
That's really interesting. I mean, for me, because yeah, guitar's my first instrument, but I'm just playing more and more bass, and I play it a lot in gigs as well. And I'm just getting better and more comfortable with it, and more proficient as playing as a bass player, you know. And so for me, yeah, the high notes don't appeal on as much on a bass because I do a lot of that on guitar as well, especially like screaming guitar solos. So for me, when I'm playing bass, I really like the lower ends of it, and just functioning in that warmer area. Like I prefer like a warmer bass sound, and playing with the fingers, and just really resonating in that frequency and putting that part of the structure into the song and playing that role, you know. Because I guess because I've done a lot of the higher things, I love playing chunky rhythm stuff on guitar, but I got quite a big spectrum of sound on that. So yeah, for me, personally, I wouldn't seek to go much higher on the bass because I already do that elsewhere.
but that's well, I think one of the things I wrote into these songs. Hopefully, I kind of put it into the fabric of the actual music is that these songs should be playable. Like I told my producer this fact, like when we first started working together, and he thought that was just a really nice sentiment because for me, the ultimate like guitar learning song is Back in Black. You know, just I think every guitar teacher has mentioned it at least once. You know, not so
For
much,
sure, yeah.
not so much Smoke on the Water. We talk about Smoke on the Water a lot because of the significance, but actually to play Back in Black tends to be more the one that kids want to play, and I think there's a reason behind it because the song features open chords, E, D, and A, and a twiddly 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 bit that's really hard.
Exactly. It's got that little spice on it,
It's got
hasn't it?
that little bit that makes it nearly impossible as a beginner.
Yeah.
And so I feel that there's something in that, in the if the songs are playable in a way from start to finish, that means that they're interesting, that they go places. It's not like, I mean, could you imagine getting your acoustic guitar out to, I don't know, a track like "Sorry" by Justin Bieber? You know, where you're like, okay, I've got the three chords, cool, yeah, A flat, C minor, B flat, yeah, yeah, A flat, B flat, C minor. Well, that's just three chords over and over and over and over and over and over and over to the point where if the section never changes, it's not very much fun to play along to. Now, I'm guessing at this. I'm assuming that people don't play along to pop songs like that. Not just specifically that song, but the modern pop stuff that doesn't really change from the verse to the chorus. It's just one loop.
When I was teaching guitar, so yeah, so I'd start with songs that maybe had like four chords in it, and then could be like G, D, E minor, C, and so it's very accessible to get into that. But then also like, okay, right, in the verse you want to do less. Here's some rhythms you can use for the chorus, and to kind of fill it out a bit more. So you're giving them the tools to make it better and do more with it. So yeah, they're not going to get bored because yeah, if you can just plonk through this and it works, but yeah, to make it more enjoyable, here's how to then enjoy it more without making it more difficult. You can make it as difficult as you want, and or as least boring as you want. All right. So after the bass, what came next?
So that most of in fact, all of the songs were recorded or written, shall we say, written before recorded in their entirety. In their entirety, in the living room. And I mention that because I think it's quite common these days to get the computer out, whether it's GarageBand, Logic, Cubase, and kind of start the process in front of the screen. Um, I don't know whether I'd class it as fortunate, but I was quite fortunate to grow up recording into a Tascam Porter 07 tape cassette 4-track recording unit, which meant that when I was recording, I would record a drum track into the tape, and then I'd have to play along to the drum track with the guitars and various layers, and you get used to the fact that you had to get it right in one go, the whole song. You couldn't just record the verse and stop and
Yeah.
then see how that sounds, and that you had to have the whole song imagined in your head before you even went to record it. So I thought there was something in that I wanted most of the writing to be in my head rather than effects and sound effects and processing, if you know what I mean. So all of the songs were written on acoustic guitar, and they're all playable on acoustic guitar, just as one instrument. But then it was the case of once the song was completed as a solo acoustic singer-songwriter song, then we take it into the bedroom, then we record that bit, maybe layer up a sort of demo drum beat and like a sectional drum beats that maybe this changed, but there's no fills, it's just, how it is.
Yeah.
Just get the rough beat down, and then maybe track the acoustic guitar in properly with a drum beat behind it, and then start adding the electric guitars and bass until you've got to a point where you have a version of the song that is lead vocal, acoustic guitar, whatever electric guitars there are, bass and drums. And that's it. You've got a working version of the song. And usually that happened starting at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. By about 8 o'clock at night, I've got my working demo. And that includes writing the lyrics, writing the chords.
That's very fast.
Well, yeah. But this is where I would say that these are the songs that made it on the album. So there's 14 songs on the album, but I wrote 25. So what I noticed was that some of the ones that didn't make it were the ones that I got the verse down and I got into the bridge, and then I was like, the chorus doesn't work, or I've got a good chorus and I can't find a good verse, or it just somehow got stuck somewhere along the journey. And I just thought that is the sign that is if I've got ones that finish themselves, like Paul McCartney said, oh, the greatest songs, they write themselves. And I agree, they do. As long as the idea is strong enough and you know exactly what you want to do. I guess the only reason I mentioned 1 o'clock is because usually you get up in the morning, I guess late muso morning in those years, and then you slumber over to the shower, and once you're in the shower, bam, that's where the idea comes. You can't record the idea in the shower, so you have to sing it to yourself. Like, I remember having 2 ideas consecutively for one song. One was a chorus idea and one was a verse idea. And I spent 10 minutes in the shower, A, being a vocal melody in my head, singing it out loud while I'm washing my hair or whatever. So that when I got out of the shower, I could record it into the phone and remember exactly what those 2 lines were. And then once you've got it on your voice memo, bam, you don't have to, you can remember, you can stop thinking about it. So yeah, it was quite intense days, and it was generally the ones where the ideas were so strong in the shower. It's like, I can't risk forgetting this, and then you take it in the living room, and then it's like, right, cool, that's a whole song done.
Yeah, it's interesting because some people will spend a lot of time writing. Yeah, like you said, some songs write themselves. I think it's Bumblefoot saying like sometimes he just gets music and he's like, it's like downloading it. It's like almost it's kind of comes through complete, but then you need to have the faculties to be able to process that and get it out. Whereas other things, it feels like you're sort of like chipping away at marble, like the statue eventually reveals itself, but there's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's mileage in discussing the opposite way of composing. Like, I mean, this is a pop rock album that I produced, but I also love heavy metal and have a side project that is a heavy metal project, which I wrote all the songs in the opposite way, which is where the guitar parts and the backing tracks get done first, and then you try and slot words over the top. I find that so much more difficult to do. The words are more difficult to write when the song is already done. For me, at least, when you're putting the chords to the words, you can do so much more, because you might just have the idea in your head of the chorus line or something. It's like, well, does that want the root with it? Is that the third or the fifth? Or I can change that and put that scale with it? Or there's so much I think you can do with a melody. Whereas if you're trying to fit a melody to an already existing chord progression, I don't know. It feels like the result. I've never had a good result like writing the chords first and putting pop words to it. It seems like the story is the most important for me.
Yeah, I mean the feeling. It's I read something with Sting. He says like sometimes he'd have just like write music and then write lyrics other times, and sometimes pair them up. And like I've done that as well. Um, yeah, I will never sort of try and cram a melody line over chords, because if I'm working on a melody line, it's got to fit with the chords because that gives all the notes context. But um, yeah, sometimes if you have the music first and you've got the feeling there, so you've got to fit things on top that fit with that vibe. So, but also for me, sometimes when you're writing, you'll be like putting the music together, and that's the kind of vibe. And sometimes it seems similar to other songs that other people have written. So you're like, have I tuned into that same kind of vibe, similar kind of arrangement, or
Well, this is it. This is where I wonder whether you're right with that, in a sense that if you write a chord progression, your brain just scrambles for all the songs that you know that sound like it, and then try and play you a song in your head that you recognize, and therefore you think that melody and you play along to it. You go, "Oh, I've got this really cool idea," and then later on you realize you're just singing someone else's melody. It's I don't know whether there is something like that, but I do believe that every song that has been written sounds like has come from some other song before. It has to, there's only 12 notes, isn't there?
it's yeah. There's it does seem there's only so much you can do, but then recently there's been quite a few like copyright cases. There was Dua
Dua
Lipa,
Lipa
yeah,
and
and
Ed Sheeran as well, yeah.
but
See,
then they use such basic building blocks and such
well,
um
this is interesting. I mean, like, I'm thinking about putting a section like this, a descriptive section on the website like this when I eventually get around to that. Talking about maybe just one of the songs and showing how I used ideas from other songs intentionally,
right, yeah, that'd be really
but
interesting.
but to show the difference as to how you can be inspired by an idea versus rip it off verbatim.
Yeah,
Like, and I think it's quite simple. Is that if you put to use the same musical device, like for instance, like we would have remembered from college, My Funny Valentine or something with the what was it, C minor major 7, C minor 7, C minor 6, that descending
yeah,
semitone. That is a musical device which, if you put that descending semitone on a minor chord in another song, it will link you back to that My Funny Valentine feeling. But you can't really say that just using the chords is ripping off the song. If you then do a different melody over it, or even you might use it as a counterpoint line in the backing guitar
yeah.
part or something. That's one of the ideas.
For me, I tend to think in chunks, like arrangement chunks. So, for example, like for me, it wouldn't be just a chord progression. It could be, say, like a certain drum beat, and then the bass could be going da 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 da, for example, and then some guitar parts, like some popping lines, like just floating over the top, and that creates like a whole texture in itself. So I'd say that kind of texture is like my kind of like building structure, and then I use that kind of feel, maybe use it in a different key or slightly different arrangement. But I'd use that.
But again, this is the point: is that you modify it some way. You take an idea and you change it. That's what you're saying, I think, and that's what I believe as well. Is that you take an idea and you see what they did with it, and you do it your own way. So, like another influence of one of the songs is, funnily enough, Mr. Brightside.
Okay, the
Now, the
song I
song
play every week. Yeah,
exactly, yeah, the song I play every week as well, which is why it must be a massive influence. But um, it doesn't sound anything like Mr. Brightside. What I did was I used the musical device of the structure of their lyrics. Um, so Mr. Brightside, verse 1 is exactly the same as verse 2.
and also the melody line is pretty much the same note consistently through the verse, isn't it? Da 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 da
Yeah,
da
so
da 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 da.
right, so there's a good point, is that I nicked the idea of repeating the same verse. That is what I nicked from Mr. Brightside. Verse 1 and verse 2 are the same. Because my choruses, I had two different choruses. So I thought, well, if the choruses are different, then let's just use the same verse. But then change the background vibe behind it. So you've got the same words, but they're dressed up differently for verse 2. Different modal scene, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because it could be argued that it was kind of lazy songwriting because they basically just did the same verse twice and the same
Well,
chorus. It's like,
exactly, yeah, and
they,
but they use the same chorus twice as well. So actually, there's one verse and one chorus, and that's it, and a middle eight section that's kind
yeah,
of the end, and that's it, really. But yeah, so I used that idea from that song, but you wouldn't say that this particular song sounds anything like Mr. Brightside
yeah, right,
because I've used the idea that they did, not the chord progression or the rhythm of the melody or that pentatonic lick, like Dua Lipa with the chord progression, nicking everything seemingly verbatim from the previous songs.
yeah. And then they outcast one and some other, but it's such basic building blocks that we could probably find 10 other songs that use that. And this
Mm.
is why I'm not worried about my songs being copyrighted. Like, well, that song I've got about the shaman turning into a werewolf and things is like so progressive and all these different things going on. It's like, yeah, good luck copying that. Like, you might find your riff is a little bit similar here, but like with all the changes and all the stuff in there, just write better material. Because if you just like, oh, I've got G, D, and A, oh, someone's copied me. Like, no, everyone is using that.
But right, like what you've just said, write better material. Yes, I agree. Be better. Be a better composer, a better artist, a better musician, whatever, lyricist. Just don't just go, oh, they did that, I'll do that as well. Cool. Well, now you're copywriting.
It's just, and it's the level of new material is just boring anyway. Right. So after what was the next part of the album? So was there more recording or?
So yeah, we've written the songs. I guess some of them were written in just like in the living room where you got the laptop out, you got the guitar in your hand, and you've got one idea of a line, and then you flesh it all out. Others took a bit longer. There's a track that for me is a bit of a tribute to Stan by Eminem, um, only in the sense that it's more spoken rather than sung. It's not
Okay.
rapped, but it's more spoken. And there are four verses and three identical choruses, so it's like a bit like the same song structure as Stan as well, um, except it's not three three verses of Stan and one verse of Eminem. It's actually just four verses of me getting a bit more annoyed. Why I'm like it's like a diary entry sort of thing.
Right.
So essentially, then um, yeah, I kind of wrote the lyrics in a diary, and that's when it started to dawn on me that actually, if you're writing down in a diary just your thoughts, like you can quite easily shape them, manipulate them into lyrics. If when you're thinking your thoughts, you kind of think in a rhythm. It doesn't have to be in a melody, but think in a rhythm as you're writing your thoughts, like da 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 da
Yeah.
da 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 da
Okay.
da 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 da. That sort of thing.
I was listening to someone on the radio and it's a singer I don't know, and she's being interviewed, and the guy was saying, "Oh, I really like your lyrics," and she's saying it's very easy for her because she just says exactly what's happening. She says there's a song about her ex-boyfriend or something, and it was like, "Oh, so he turned up at 8," and he goes like, "If he turned up at 8, that's the lyric. I don't change to 7." And then like he was wearing a green sweater because that's what he was wearing. So for her, it's quite a direct, easy process to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that goes into a different discussion about like what lyrics actually are or what they should be. Like I think the best songs are actually true, from true stories, um, and it's more credible if it actually happened and you're just describing what happened, whereas describing a sort of fictitious sort of fantasy scene or something like you've got to describe a lot really well to make that like hit someone in the same way as like I don't know, like a tragedy, like a breakup or death of a loved one or whatever your theme is.
Yeah, I've heard that the more personal you make it, the more universal the appeal. Ironically,
Well, yeah,
because
and in some ways, that's why. I mean, do you remember at all? I think it was something that Sean Baxter said once. I can't remember whether it was in the Guitar Institute or in the Academy, but it was like the songwriting class and about avoiding the topic of love for your lyrics and all of this sort of stuff. And it was like, well, yeah, if you don't want to go down the mainstream path, yeah, avoid that sort of thing. But I chose that path. I chose to write a breakup album, and I did that, I think, because it is a universal concept. You know, whoever you are, you've probably been through a breakup of
yeah, I
some
think
description.
as long as you give it an interesting twist on it, because if it's just like, yeah, I'm feeling sad, a lot of people can relate to that, but
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Yeah, I mean, you've got a very good question angle there. Like, I mean, how do you deal with it? Do you tell the story from the point of view of the broken up, the person who was dumped or dumped on, or do you tell it from the point of view of the person who kind of did the dumping and got away lightly, or what perspective is it from? Like,
There's got to be some tension and some interest, and if it's
well, yeah,
just
because my album is about a Spanish girl, like I'm going through my song lyrics with my teacher, my Spanish teacher, and kind of making translations of the songs. And so for her, she gets to understand what the actual lyrics mean. She knows about four of the songs already, but
right,
she's never heard them. She's just read the words. They're just poetry at the moment, I guess. And it's interesting hearing the reaction from just the words, because like she doesn't give me the impression that my album is about, oh, this ex-girlfriend, oh, she was a bitch, oh, it's not about that, it's at no point am I kind of throwing my toys out of the pram going, oh well, man, this is crap. It's like it's telling a story of um pretty much all of the good times that people share together. And I guess in one sense, I don't think any of the one songs on their own are like they're probably like they're not ever going to be like this. It's not going to be a living on a prayer situation.
yeah,
But I think collectively, as all 14 of the songs, one after the other, that is like a full like audio book description of my life with songs. From start where it starts really optimistic and hopeful, and the music's really lively and positive, and gets like the full band rocky stuff where it's like swagger central out the way at the beginning, and then the mood kind of dips and it goes a bit quiet and a bit down, and then kind of the more darker stuff comes in, and it is on a full like a roller coaster journey in like the way the vibes of each song goes. um but yeah, I guess it's quite difficult to kind of sum up all in one go like that.
but yes, because you've got that narrative going through it, and I think for this kind of thing, if you can put some intimacy in it or some details, people, it draws people in a bit more, and it's a slightly like voyeuristic thing on their part, like they can understand a bit deeper into it rather than just someone saying, "Oh, we broke up." Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the album I would most liken it to in theme is Rumors by Fleetwood Mac,
right,
except
okay,
the difference the difference being that the other person is not in the band and is not recording
yeah,
like any of
the other
these songs at
parts,
the
yeah,
same time, but the intensity of the emotion for me is about the same level as Rumors. And I think that's another one of the big influences, because they are extremely negative, frustrating lyrics dressed up in such pretty chords. The juxtaposition
oh
of
yeah, I love that.
positive with negative. And I think that is something that is really special. Like I thought about it when I was writing. Like you've got miserable lyrics with miserable chords. You've got miserable lyrics with positive chords. You've got happy lyrics with miserable chords, or happy lyrics with happy chords. And I think only really like one of them seems to work. Because imagine if you're telling like a really happy song, but you've got all these dirty, dissonant, miserable sounding intervals happening, and the clash chords going in, and the dirge at the bottom. It's like, that's a wrong kind of juxtaposition.
I think if you have like sad lyrics with happy melodies, it's kind of like, it's a bit cheeky. You can like slipping it under the radar. You can actually go, well, actually, it's about this. Whereas,
Well, yeah, and I think that is maybe there's something in that, is that it's confusing as to what it might mean. Like, well, the song suggests it's a happy song, but read the words, and oh my God, it's so dark.
but it gives it extra depth, doesn't it? Like there's different levels on it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess I don't know whether you remember. Was she Swedish or Norwegian? The pop artist Lena Marlin. Do you remember that? She had a song called "Sitting Down Here." I'm sitting down here, and boy, you can see me. That one. Anyway, the whole album, "Playing My Game," I think it is. She is a master of writing, cutting like knife out against the throat, like
Right.
lyrics, but it's just D, A, E minor, G, A, D. It's all really simple functional harmony, and the songs sound simple, but God, it's so dark and cutting, some of her words. And I thought that's another, well, maybe that's another Fleetwood Mac style example. Dark lyrics, positive sounds, chords.
I mean, some of their stuff really was right, not on the edge of over the edge. I mean, they right in recording songs like "You Make Loving Fun Again," like while like the X is playing on the record, and like,
Well,
whoa,
yeah,
that's
the
like,
documentary was on Sky Arts like a few weeks ago, and I watched it again, and Lindsey Buckingham talking about, well, the order of which people were allowed in the studio, because like he wouldn't want Stevie Nicks to go in until like he'd done all of his bits, because then like she'd be there and he wouldn't be able to do it, or she would be breaking down because she's singing these words about her. And oh yeah, it just sounds like a nightmare. I'm surprised that album ever got finished, But
there's a
again,
lot of cocaine as well, which like, and
yeah,
probably other
yeah,
things.
and there seems to be a lot of heavy drugs involved in a lot of great albums, really. But unfortunately, not on this one. The most is like quite a lot of tea, quite a lot of cannabis, and like quite a lot of bacon.
Bacon is like the classic, yes.
Yeah.
All right, so after you've recorded the vocals, was production something that really dragged out the completion of the
Yes.
album?
Production was the thing that took the longest. I mean, to sum it up really quickly, the songs were written between February 2014 and September 2014. And funnily enough, I went to Bill in September 2014 and basically showed him the tracks that I'd got: MIDI drums, guide vocals, DI'd acoustic guitar, all demoed, ready to sort of do properly at a later date. And he listened to it and he took some notes, and we had a chat about it and stuff. Well, yeah, maybe sort of quoted me for the idea of going into a studio with a drummer and a bass player and recording it as a band, as a live take. And I was like, no, that's not what I want to do at all, because that's going to be a cost of hiring the studio, hiring the producer, hiring the drummer and the bass. I ain't got that much money, mate.
And
Sorry.
them learning the songs, and yeah, it takes
Yeah,
time.
yeah. So I'd always thought of at that point that I was going to record every instrument one bit at a time. I just needed to figure out the best way to do it. And I guess the reason why I went round to him was because of live drums. I'm going to get live drums on this. And I didn't know at that point about Ed and whether that was going to be possible, but then that seemed to work out. So yeah, from September 2014 onwards to July 2018, I guess that was tracking. Final bits of drum, well, the drums, the acoustic drums, comping the drums, mixing a backing track to get to a point where you then record the acoustic guitar over it, and then the vocals on top of the last thing to go down with final vocals.
Yeah, so this is quite common with recording albums. You'll put together demos and then sort of a backing track to play along to, and then all the real tracks get then recorded over those, and those first ones get deleted, and then you've got the final files, because it gives you a framework to play to. I mean, if it was something like Miles Davis doing a jazz album like back in the 60s, they all just played the same at the same time in one room, and had that kind of feel. But now with multi-track recording, you generally have a framework that's usually programmed or pre-recorded, and then you put everything on top of that.
Yeah, so that then means that every song is metronomically accurate, in time. It's all to a certain beat per minute, because the drums were originally MIDI drums. So they are all at a very specific tempo, although I wasn't super picky about pushing the odd fill, or if I landed late on the guitar or something, and like, I don't need to put it bang in time. I left it a bit dirty, a bit rough, in places, to make it feel like it hadn't been tracked to a click, but actually it had.
Yeah, it gives a bit more sort of breath, but then playing everything onto that grid is like an art form in itself. Depending on the style of music, again, like rock and metal, you want that kind of structure and tension. Although it's gone too far at the moment, where things are just overly quantized and produced. But yeah,
Yeah, and
you want a bit more. You still want it to sound a bit more loose as well. Like the tight but loose is the kind of saying.
competent but loose. Yeah, I think you need to sound like you know what you're doing, and you're not like just getting away with it, but actually, yeah, it's got to have some human feel to it. And I think the thing that's probably surprising for me is that because I'm primarily a guitar player, before that I was primarily a bass player. I started on bass, but bass and guitar are my two main favorite instruments. But when I recorded the parts in, like the electric guitars were essentially DI'd from a Vox Valvetronic amps. So they were just done, and they didn't ever change. So the guide guitars are the final guitars,
Okay.
essentially, because well, they were never really guide guitars. They were always just straight away final guitars. Um, but yeah, it was only the vocals and the acoustic guitar that I had to do from guide to final and upgrade them. But then again, at the time, at the beginning in 2014, I wasn't really a lead singer. I didn't have a voice, but over that time in the wedding bands, I was starting to do three-piece frontman sort of jobs occasionally. And then by the time I'd done the acoustic guitars, I was doing a lot more frontman gigs. And then by the time I was recording the vocals, that's all I did was three-piece frontman gigs. So I was getting my voice hopefully a bit more trained up and a bit more, well, less virginal, shall we say.
Yeah, and also like finding where your voice sounds the best, because everyone has their. Some people do have like an exceptionally wide range of colors they can put in their voice, but most people, they really come into their own in one kind of area. Like for me, it's slightly higher than average. I've always had a slightly lighter voice than most people, and been hit slightly higher. But my voice is generally a bit thinner, but then it kind of cuts through a little bit on that range. But when I compare myself to other people, I see or singers that they have like a real richness and warmth in my voice that I could never get when I was younger. So it's just finding what is good for you rather than trying to mold it onto what you think will work.
Well, yeah, and I think each different track has a different vocal sound as well. Like there was one track that I had to re-record the vocals with because I couldn't work it out for so long. It just didn't sound right. You know, when you're listening to it going, but ignoring the mixing, ignoring the production, but just the original file that you've
Yeah.
got, like the performance of it, like there's something not quite right with it. And it's like a mid-tempo acoustic kind of country pop song. I'm just like, it just doesn't sound like that. The words are all at the right pitch and they're all sung accurately, but I decided that I'd sung them in too hard, too forcefully.
Right.
So I retracked it in a lot softer voice, and all of a sudden it worked. It's like, okay, this is a soft song, right? Okay, and therefore you have to get used to the different traditions of how to record the voice when you're belting it out, and
Yeah.
then when you're actually close to whispering. Like I found an interesting phenomenon. I don't know whether you've experienced this with recording vocals, but when you're giving it the Bon Jovi or the power voice or whatever it is, you stood up and you've got the sort of pose going, and it's like, yeah, you belt it out. But actually, for the quiet things, I found if I was sat on a chair or a bench, a bit like I am now, I've kind of got my feet up and my kind of arms wrapped around my knees and stuff. I think it kind of like must restrict I don't know, the resonance or the something in the way your voice goes. In that, if you're sat down, it's much easier to record quietly than it is if you're stood up.
The energy of your body and your posture is much more like not relaxed,
Like it's
but
curtailed, yeah,
yeah,
like
you're
kind
sort of
of.
like curled in a bit, so you're naturally projecting in a different way and less generally. Whereas, yeah, I mean, I generally like to sing standing up when I'm recording, especially like the louder stuff. But even the quieter things, I will just prefer to stand and imagine just still on a stage and performing in that way rather than sitting down. But yeah, each to their own.
Well, that's another interesting thing. Like on a stage, yeah. Well, that is quite an important phrase because, like, I was recording the vocals in my bedroom, and a lot of the time it was through summer. I mean, it took what, I think 13 months, maybe 14 months to do all of the vocals. So that's through summer and winter. And the worst part was recording through like May and June in the hot summer's days, but wanting the room to be like a stage, which means pitch black with a stage light, blue, green, red, whatever you get. And I've got like an old stage light that I put on top of my wardrobe and just set it to auto, and it'll make me feel like I'm on stage. I've got my
Oh,
in-ears
right, yeah.
in, close the curtains, blackout curtains, and it's like as soon as you finish recording, smack the fan on because it's boiling.
Yeah, and you can't have the window open because there's stuff
Can't have
going
the
on
window
outside.
open because it's so noisy from outside. And it's just like, yeah, there was times when I just thought, the sun is out outside and you're choosing to stand in a pitch black room in the middle of the day. But, it has to be done. So I guess that was just my situation. But then I guess turning it round to see it as that, well, my vocal booth is my bedroom, and think how much it would be to hire a vocal booth, every day for like 14 months.
Did you notice over those 14 months that your voice changed?
Yes. Yeah. It got better and stronger, but then I only really noticed it towards the end when I was going to the wedding gigs and thinking, well, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm used to singing 4 hours, like constantly non-stop, because I would I would track the vocals by section, chorus, verse, or bridge, or whatever, but just put maybe 2 bars before it, put the cycle bar, just
Yeah.
take one, take two, take three, take 25, take 45, and you just keep going and going and go. So there's no break. So I would record and track for about 4 hours before I think my voice decided that's about enough. So then obviously getting to the wedding gig at the Saturday going, well, I've only got to sing for 2 hours on Saturday, not four. So when I was recording the vocals, my wedding gigs were so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, when I've done like work on cruise ships, sometimes you're singing 7 days a week. And then, because before that, we're like, oh, 2 gigs a week. Oh, it's going to be crazy. I'm singing on Friday and Saturday. And then, yeah, I mean, your voice gets wrecked if you're doing that kind of residency thing anyway. But
Yeah, I think
the
there's got,
stamina built into your voice and your fingers just really, it does sit in there as well. Because, yeah, I mean, I've gone through periods where I'm practicing like 8 hours a day. But yeah, like performing 7 days a week it's,
especially with the voice as well. I mean, fingers can ache and skin can come off and all that sort of stuff. But I remember having a chat a couple of years ago with a female singer who I did acoustic duo gigs with, and she was a singer, vocal teacher, singing in the afternoons, very busy at the weekend, sometimes 4 gigs a weekend. And it's like, I've got a problem with my voice, and the doctors tell me to, stop talking to people, because
yeah.
just your voice just never gets a rest. You're always talking. You're in the break, and you're shouting over the loud music. And so, in some ways, I thought that like actually, it's nice if you're like in some of your off time, you're just kind of at home by yourself, and you're not really using your voice that much. And
Yeah, another thing with regularly performing as a singer is that you're never at your best. Like you, because they're like, oh, give 100%, and like you can't unless you're doing like 1 gig a week and you have sufficient recovery time. Because if you go all out, you give it 100%, then you're gonna be wrecked the next day. So you'd have, I
yeah,
mean,
I
you'd be
mean,
playing at like 85, 90 on a good day, because you not necessarily like you want to hold back, but you have to pace yourself because like, I've got to do this tomorrow and I've got to sound consistent. And it's
yeah, I
if you're then
think
in the
there's
studio, you can then like actually go to 100%, but it's you can't often do that live.
Yeah, there's something that I noticed with the voice that I believe is true for all instruments, voice included, and guitar and drums and piano and everything. Um, when you first learn an instrument as a beginner, your natural reaction is to bash that drum as hard as possible, pluck that string as hard as
Yeah,
possible, dung, 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 dung. And I think it's the same with vocals, is where you shout and you sing at the top of your velocity range. And actually you realize that just like with guitar, if you want to play 16th notes, you're not going to play them loud. And if you want to play on the drums, it's like you're not going to be coming back. Like your hand's not going to be coming up
yeah,
that far. Um, and I think it's something that even if because we both went to the Guitar Institute, we both went through all these learning disciplines and all that sort of stuff. And even knowing about it still doesn't stop you from having to go through it on a different instrument. Like I did vocal gigs where I didn't have a guitar and I burnt my voice out in 3 songs. I was like, I've got an hour and a half left to do, and it's already gone.
Yeah, if you're sick, yeah, and you've got to cover the gig. I've done those as well.
Just falsetto is king. It's but so I think there's something about it that I must have known, like right at the beginning, that well, the vocals are going to go down last, so we just have to make sure that in the day job, the wedding gigs are making the voice better in a gradual sense, so that by the time I'm ready to track the lead vocals, I'll be a better singer. That was part of the plan.
Right. And again, if you were a signed artist, this would be your entire thing. Whereas,
Oh yeah.
if you've got to do day jobs and other things, you've got to fit it around that and keep yourself in as good condition as you
Well,
can.
yeah, I think this is another thing that's worth mentioning is that like for any artist to record their own work independently, you have to have it. You'd be doing it in your own spare time. It's a hobby, really, isn't it? Like we're not doing it with any promise of any contractual money at the end of
Yeah,
it. You do it as a sort of, well, this is my spare time, and I think most people don't realize that musicians don't generally have enough time to do a hobby project. Like we have our obligations, our teaching, our wedding gigs, our brown eyed girl, our Wonderwall, our Mr. Brightside, and that it takes a certain amount of effort to just get through that week, but then to go and be able to have enough days free to be able to spend money on a project rather than make money from a project, I think
yeah,
is quite something. And I think that's why like to do a project over 8 years is like, to be able to have that much time to dedicate to it must say something as well. Like I've sacrificed so much to put time into this album. Like one of the hardest months was February 2018, in which of the 28 days I worked 25 days and I got paid for 3 of them. 3 gigs in February. So, 450 quid, 500 quid, whatever.
yeah.
Rent is covered. The other 22 days were tracking recording in my bedroom. Like, just get up, set the mic up, go and have lunch, come back, warm up, bam, 4 hours of recording, finish at 6, 7 o'clock, then do the editing, headphones on, edit, bounce it down, go and stand outside, smoke, listen to the mix on your phone. Tweak, maybe do that, go back into the computer 3 or 4 times, then it's 11 o'clock and it's like time to go to bed. Well, it's not time to go to bed, it's time to stop, but and
You
then
keep
you've
going,
got
yeah.
you keep going. And it's just, and there were those days where you just waking up in a room, working in the room, going to bed in the room. And it was a weird time, but I think I must have done it because I knew that it just had to be done, and what else can you do?
Yeah, I've done that. When it's my last solo guitar album, I was still living in London, and you're sort of renting like a 1-bedroom place, or it was a shared apartment, so like I just had my room, and like so it was like the bed, the computer, and the guitars, and occasionally like a couple of people came around, like Kian, like came down to do some bass. I got a cello player locally through Gumtree, paid like 30 quid for like an hour's work or something, and but yeah, other parts were sent online, like through Fiverr. I got some brass done and some other bits and bobs. But generally, yeah, on the days you're not working for money, you're just in that room, just doing it on your own. Break for
Just
lunch,
slogging it
sat in front of the
away.
computer. Yeah,
Yeah, it can be a soul destroying process, but I think that when you're in it and you're in the middle of it, you don't think about the kind of the tying it up and the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's. You're just like, is this sounding good? Does this sound how I want it to sound? And I think a lot of people have asked me the question, do you wish you'd have done like just a solo acoustic album? Would have been much quicker. I thought, yeah, certainly would have. Probably wouldn't have taken 8 years to do that. Maybe the next album will be a solo acoustic album. It's just,
but also over 8 years, there would have been significant life events, and you would have hopefully like changed and grown as a person
well,
as well
yeah, I
over that.
mean,
Because often an album is like a snapshot in time for like a year or whatever. You know, it's like it's recorded at that point,
Of
but
course, and
for
one
you,
of the
it's really
songs
spanned.
is called "Snapshot of a Musician," um, which is like just I think interesting that you raised that. But yeah, I was 29 when I started recording this album or writing the album. I'm 37 now, so it's like
Yeah, significant.
it's a significant portion of any person's life. I think some people would describe it as the prime years. Maybe it's your mid 20s that are your prime years, but I think your 30s are also your prime years as well. And you know, also to know that, like, I mean, the album is about a girl that I care a lot for, and it it's quite hard to go through being in relationships um, when the thing that you're working on in your spare time, your hobby, is a project about that just is to show how much you cared about this other person. So obviously, like you got to deal with the breakup side of it. And the stupid thing was, I was only with the girl for 3 months.
And like, what? So while you're with other relationships, then you're still like digging into that wound for
Yeah,
creative goals.
exactly. And this is where I think a lot of the people who knew me and spoke to me at the time um, couldn't quite understand what I was doing to myself. It's like, just put the spade down. No, don't hit yourself over the head with it. What are you doing? You know. So it happened, but then because I was inspired and writing the songs about it, that essentially the meaning and the message of the album was to ask the girl why. Why did you do what you did? You know, so it's like the whole focus of these songs is like, you never told me why, so why? This is my point. Let me know your point. Um, and so I think it was 2015, about 2 years after, well, the next year, about 18 months after she'd gone, um, that I was like, right, I really need to kind of get this girl out of my head now, and I need to go out and dating and stuff. So I went speed dating, and I met someone, um, a girl called Yasmin, really great girl, and we were together a few months, and I didn't get any work done while we were dating. Like nothing on the album
I
happened while
totally,
we were
yeah,
in a
get
relationship,
that point.
and so that was quite poignant for me because, like, I'm sure Yasmin would have known at the time as well that like something was off. But I was trying to break out of a place in my head. But then once you're in this new relationship, then actually you realize, oh crap, I'm not quite as over this other person as I thought. So this can't be good. And then that's when I kind of ended the relationship and decided that because if you're going to be with someone, you need to give them like your entire undivided attention, really. And I felt that working on a project about an ex-girlfriend whilst I'm trying to be with the girlfriend is like, I think it was just too much anxiety and stress and stuff in my head. So I chose to sacrifice relationships and remain single until the project was over so I could fully commit to it, say everything I wanted to say, and then get it out of my head and draw a line underneath it.
Do you feel you've processed that now? Now the album's
Well, I
complete.
mean, lots of people have asked me, you know, are you still into her? And it's like, well, at the end of the day, if you feel that strongly about someone that you get as far as thinking that she is the one, then it's hard to shake that. But obviously, real life gets in the way, and 8 years have passed. Anything could happen. She's probably got her own family,
Yeah,
might not even be alive anymore. There's many
yeah, yeah.
possibilities. Um, but yeah, it was one of those things of I need to get this out of my head. I need to say what I need to say, and um, I'm over it. I chose to think that yes, it would be nice if it all worked out in a fairy tale, Disney sense or whatever fairy tale movie, but reality is that chances are it won't. um, yeah, like then it's just hopefully just a very good story and like some nice songs that came out of it. But I really would be interested to know what she thinks. She's the only girl in my life that told me to delete her contact details and never contact her ever again. So that's that, really.
That would have been my next question. Would you like her to hear it, or like,
Well,
what would be your
that's
opinion on
kind of
hearing
the
it?
point of the songs, is that they actually are directed to her. So like one of the lyrics in the chorus is, "I'm singing this song to you because I can't get you out of my mind." So the the lyrical direction is from me to her. So when people are listening to it, I guess they're either going to side with, I guess, the guy if you're the guy, and maybe side with the girl if you're the girl, or whatever. Um, and imagine those words being sung to you or something. But yeah, it's, I guess it'll probably go down like you're a fly on a wall of this weird situation. It's like, well, how's this going to turn out? It's, I don't. There's the occasional sample of her voice, like from a birthday party that I had, and it was recorded, so the audio's there. And
So she's on the album,
she
technically.
is on the album, yeah. Um, which is, it all kind of is evidence of itself. Like when one of the tracks is like, "I saw you laughing and smiling with me," blah 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 blah, and it's like you hear her laugh. You've heard it. No, it's true. I guess it's maybe in a reference to, was it like Maroon 5? Was that Songs About Jane? Was like a breakup album, I think, as
Oh,
well. It's more of a, I think that was one where it was like definitely about one girl, because it's Songs About Jane. It's definitely
right.
about
Yeah,
Jane,
that makes sense.
Um, but yeah, I guess then there is also the, I've got to consider the angle that, maybe some girls don't want songs written about them, but us guys, we just do it anyway, don't we?
That's it. I mean, I mean, unlikely we'll get a song written about us, because he writes songs
Yes,
about lots of
unless
other
it's
people.
where sort of this dude's an idiot or whatever it is sort of song.
Yeah. Do you think maybe the album sort of transcends the relationship, because obviously it's how you're processing all of that, but then now you've sort of hopefully passed that stage. It's the album as an entity is still there, and
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
a separate thing in itself.
it is. I guess what's becoming evident the more people I talk to is that what I think the album means to me is very, very different to what the album seems to mean to other people. So, like for me, it's all about the message to her and the response and all of that sort of stuff. And since, I've committed to learning Spanish as well, like probably for the minuscule possibility that at some point I'll maybe bump into her and she'll scream in my face a bunch of Spanish, and like I might have the chance of understanding and responding in the same language. At that could be, that's kind of one of the reasons why I thought it'd be cool to learn Spanish. But then it's kind of transcended, like you say, and turned into something else, that maybe she was the person who got me interested in the culture. But now it's not just that one person. There's plenty of things about Spain that are great, and
Yeah,
there's plenty of other different Spanish girls as well.
and yeah, their craft beer scene is surprisingly good. Because I've been to
Mm.
Barcelona quite a few times, and we started finding these little cool little beer bars. And best chicken burger I had in my life was in Barcelona. Cool story.
Nice, typical Spanish meal.
It was, yeah, but like literally transcendent, and like amazing beers. So like, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I guess in the sense that if I hadn't have done the album or gone through this experience and ended up learning the language, then I wouldn't be able to maybe consider going on holiday or visiting other countries and being able to speak the language as well. Like, I mean, it's not anywhere brilliant at the moment, but I've been doing it for about 2 years, and I'm I'm doing it without really knowing like what level I'm at, because it's not like there's beginner class and then
Yeah,
there's GCSE class and A level and university class. It's like, well, we're just teaching you things. And this is, I think some of the stuff that I'm learning is at an intermediate level, like B1, B2 sort of level at the moment. And I'm just like, yeah, but I don't even know most of the vegetables,
yeah,
But it's interesting, I've since started going to like a Spanish speakers meetup in London, where there's normally about six of us, mostly English. Occasionally there's a Spanish person. It's like language exchange.
yeah.
So the Spanish girl or whatever wants to speak English more, and we want to speak Spanish more, and it's just a bit of a 2 hour chat sort of thing. And that's been really cool, and like I think really important, to kind of tie it back in some way to musician things. Is like, now that I'm doing something that I'm, I guess, not
not very knowledgeable of. Like with a guitar, I've been to university about it, I teach it, I know a lot about guitar, but with this it's like feeling like a beginner. And when I'm listening to people speaking and like, oh well, I think you meant that, and I know, oh, I don't know what to say back, I can't think fast enough, it's like,
Yeah.
I think it's nice if you are very knowledgeable in one area to put yourself in another area where you're the exact opposite. A bit like grade 8 guitar, but grade 1 piano at the same time or something.
Yeah, I've been doing just learning a lot of different things like internet marketing and then like video editing, graphic editing, just lots of different skills and things. Like you're always sort of a
I
noob
hope you'll
at
be learning
times.
how to TikTok as well, because that's what us musicians are supposed to be doing these days, isn't it? TikToking.
Yeah, I've just started to get my head around Instagram, so I'm not going to be twerking on TikTok or anything at the moment. Just like, oh, yeah,
No.
rah. So the production was the final stage. Oh no, wasn't there? Because you got some CDs made, was that right? And you had some issues with getting those produced.
Yeah, I mean, the mixing, I went through two producers, and it took me about 2.5 years to mix the album. Um, Mainly because the first producer was a mate of mine from Sheffield. We played in a metal band together when we were younger, 16, 17. And he studied production, I think, at Leeds College of Music. And, we'd not been hanging out for a long time, and then put a message up on Facebook and was like, need someone to help me produce. And he got in touch and was like, yeah, okay, this could be cool. Schoolmates working together, and let's do it together. But it did mean, with me living in London and him living in Sheffield, that meant we could only work on it like in Sheffield.
That's about a 4 hour drive, isn't it?
Yeah, so I had to drive up Monday, maybe do 6 till 11, 6 till midnight, maybe. But that includes, chatting and catching up. And he had a fiance at that point in time as well. So there's just a lot of other things. Your mates as well. You're not there purely on business. There was a bit of money involved, but it was not a lot of money. And it was like, yeah, I think it just became a bit. I think the truth is that neither of us really understood just how big of a job it was going to be when we
Right.
started it. And then it became this mammoth leviathan that just like took over and became a bit unmanageable. And I got told that he wanted to work on his own. And I was like, well, but you don't really know what a lot of these parts are for or what to do with them. So I feel that's a bit of a bad idea. And then weeks passed and nothing got done, never got sent any mixes, and we weren't working on it very much. So I think after 13 months, and then he told me that his missus was moving to LA. She got a job in the States, and he'd been accepted with the husband visa sort of thing as well. So he was moving to the States as well.
Right.
I was like, right, now I've got like 1 month to go, and I've not really heard any recordings. It's like, and then he sent it me a week before he left, and I mean, they were mixed, but nothing that I wanted. So it was a little bit annoying to have spent 13 months schlepping up and down the M1, like
Yeah.
all this time, so many weeks, and just right, all of that work is wasted. Go start again.
Again, so that's on the other angle. So if you'd have paid someone, even if it's with mates rates, and set a time and said like, right, here's the stuff, let's like knock it out in a week or two, then it's never going to be perfect, but you have to make decisions. Say, right, this has got to be done by now, or we've got to achieve this many songs in this many days. Like, and it like forces the process, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think this is where, I mean, that was August 2019, when I'd kind of finished with the first producer and was like thinking about the second producer. Uh, and at that point in time, 2019, so that's what, 5 years in at that point, and being like, oh, my world has just crumbled. Like, I've got this 2-year project that I'm 5 years into, and now I've just wasted a year. So I was very angry, and I was not so much angry, but more just like desolate. Like, oh my god, what's going to happen? How am I going to resolve this? Because all I could see is that if I'm going to hire someone professional, it's going to cost a lot of money that I don't have. So I spoke to Bill, the producer, and we'd worked together before. I'd recorded with him on a blues band album that we did about 10 years ago, before that. And I just ranted down the phone to him. It's like, this has happened and that's happened. I've got this to do and that to do and all this and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, Steve, just breathe a minute. It's like, we'll come round, we'll have a chat. We'll see what the situation is. And maybe we'll do a track together. And if you like it, then we can just talk about an agreement or something. So, so we met up and I showed him what I had. I showed him that I had everything. I told him that I was 100% happy with the arrangement, which I think is something worth its weight in gold as a producer. You know, if the client says to you, I don't need to change anything, all that's there is it just needs buffing and polishing and mixing well, you know.
That's what I do, because a friend of mine uses the same software as I do, and then so I'll do all the editing, which is massive, but then like, right, the project is complete, I need you to make it sound good.
I mean, as it turned out, we did change a couple of things, but they weren't like major parts, you know. But so then we cracked on with the first song, which was track 2 on the album, Novia. And we had a go at it, and it sounded different to how I produced it with Ash, the first producer. And in some ways, what me and Ash achieved together sonically could be described as better than what we achieved, me and Bill, because it sounded a bit more sharp and a bit more, the drum sound at least, I remember being really impressed with. But then again, the rest of it let it down, and I've got a different sound with Bill, which he himself, you know, admitted that, you know, you could work with 3 different producers and get 3 completely different albums and be happy with all of them.
Yeah.
And that's what was interesting, because I'd said to him initially that I had this sound in my head, and with this one song, it was very difficult to put that into sounds in some ways. We had an argument over that track as well at one point, and he's like, I don't think you've got this sound, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I'm slam the sort of thing or what have you. It was a horrible moment, but what I realized at that point is that I didn't have an idea of a sound in my head. I had an idea of a set of characteristics that once they're achieved, it's done. And right. I think all it boiled down to was that the drums, in context, sounded like they should be with the bass and the guitars and the vocals. They all sounded believable. That's all I was trying to achieve, is that the sound you hear is credible. It's believable. It's not MIDI, or it's not produced poorly. It's just, there's no effects. It's just, that's what it is, but it's as good as it can be and pumped as high as it can be. Like, I like heavy metal stuff and the production and the power that you get from those produced records. And in pop music, I rarely hear anything with like smacks you in the face and like, bam, there's a chorus, you know. It seems quite gentle in singer-songwriter terms. So I was trying to achieve a pop album, but with rock and heavy music production.
You wanted some impact on it.
Yeah, I didn't want the vocals to be sitting like proud of all the instruments. I wanted the guitars to be as loud as the vocals, which is what created the arguments of that something has to suffer, Steve. You can't have everything loud. I was like, yes, you can. you truly can. It's possible. I can hear it. You know, I can hear that it will work. And we just need to find the right way of describing to you what I want to hear. And like, one of the other probably more insignificant details to most people, but that was such a big thing to me, was that we'd entered into this agreement. We're now into the contract, which was to about the value of about 20 grand for this guy. So now I'm shot my budget, 10 times already now at this point. I'm committed, and I didn't know where I was going to get the money from. But fortunately, my dad had come into a different sort of situation, and he was getting his pension at this point, and things have turned out a bit better for him at this point. He was in a position to help me. And the 3 options we had with Bill was that he would charge nothing and work for free. But then if a job that was paid that came in, that would always take priority, and I'd have to reschedule for a different day. Or we did it in a hybrid sense where I paid him some of the fee that he would ask for, and then we'd recoup the remainder from album sales or royalties or something like that. Or the other way, which was just a complete 100% buyout, which was a bit cheaper, but still a hell of a lot of money compared to what I thought I was going to spend. And it turned out that over the year, or year and a half that I was working, that we were able to kind of cover that ourselves within the family. But still, I'm in debt to at least 25, 30 grand essentially for just services of other people towards the album.
With this producer, like, had you known him previously and like checked out his previous work?
Yeah, Bill Gautier, I recorded with him when I was part of the GFB, the Gary Fletcher band, who was lucky enough to go on tour with and play quite a few gigs with. Gary Fletcher from the blues band, Paul Jones, other people like that, Tom McGuinness, and I'd recorded with Bill on Gary's album, so Bill had already known about how like ridiculously picky and perfectionist I was, about everything. So I think that's why, but he also knew of the quality that I'd recorded with him before, so that he'd at least expect a certain professionalism, I would have hoped. And that's why I think it ended up being a really good fit, because Bill knows his equipment like well, and he also likes the analog side of things and tape machines and tape compressors and valve things and all this geeky nonsense that makes the recording sound better, but you don't really know why. You might just be running something through that unit. It's not even like turned up, it's just passing through it, and it makes a difference. And also he worked a lot for studios in Covent Garden like 30 years ago or whatever it was, and was a really big important producer, working occasionally for the BBC and lots of TV stuff, and was connected to like Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits and all that sort of stuff. Mark's a good friend of his, and by that way, I mean, Pick Withers was Dire Straits' original drummer, who also played with us in Gary Fletcher's band, the blues band that I recorded with Bill. So yeah, there's some interesting big names in there, and I know Pick Withers. He's a great guy, and we were on tour in Sweden and bonded quite a lot during that tour as well. So I'm really interested to hear what he will think of it. I'm sure Bill will pass the CD on at some point, but yeah, there's a lot of different sort of people that I've met that have led me to get to this point, I suppose.
So after the production was finished, what's the next stage after that?
So then, I mean, I'd started the artwork with Anna, like I think it was 2016 or 2017 or something like that. Of course, the whole thing was useless if you've not got the audio. So the audio has to be done first, and then the artwork. And the artwork started out as just an 8-page booklet with some photos that I'd taken from the time. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll put the lyrics in as well. And then it turned into a big 24-page booklet. And,
right.
And there's each page, you've got every little specific detail, like lyric formatting legends, and what the process is. Do you put punctuation in? Do you not? Like, not having done this before, it was a bit of I guess like a bit of a blind man searching his way through the forest trying to get out, but we finally got there. And then it wasn't so much the problem of working with a graphic designer, because like Anna and I got it done. We got to a point in December 2021 where it's like, right, that's it, sign it off. There's no more changes to be made. I'm happy with it. We just need to send it to the CD company.
That's a good feeling.
But then, isn't it? Yeah, it's a great feeling. But then January 22 came, and it was like, right, now we're dealing with this. And I think they're obviously used to dealing with the part of the record company that deals with the CD, and the person knows what's expected of them, not working with the artist a lot of the time. And there were problems because, Anna was, I knew Anna, the graphic designer, from from Northolt School. Like, I taught her guitar when she was in year 9, and that was kind of the point of why I used her. She's got a Spanish surname. She's Ana Alvarez, like Rosa. So it's like it was nice to have a Spanish person working on the album,
Yeah.
you know, just to tie in with the theme. And so that's why we work together. And I guess you could argue that I could have gone to, say, a website, you know, where they just do CD artwork and that's what they do all day long, and you know, some unknown person I just tell the ideas to. But I thought it'd be more personal if, like, I worked with that artist rather than just sending it off to a company to do. And I think it has worked out better for that. But obviously, when you're doing it as, I don't think Anna's done a CD for a CD company before, and neither have I. So it was a bit of a journey of discovery, and the company came back to me with certain things, going, "Oh, this is not right. Can you sort that out? And this is not right. Can you sort that?" And I was like, "I don't really know what half of this means, but like, okay, I'll try." And it just took a long time. So about 4 months of faff till
Wow.
the end of
Okay.
April. Like, I paid the CD company in January and took delivery of the CDs in mid-May. So
Yeah.
and I started the conversation with the CD company in July 2021. So that's what, 9 months, essentially nearly 10 months of toing and froing and phone calls. And oh man, one of the things that was annoying was the code on the album, you know, the album sleeve code,
Yeah.
which you and I know that it means nothing really, doesn't it? You don't use it for anything other than just to see it on the side of the album and referencing or something. But I when we were mixing the album, that's when the DDP file gets made. That's the master audio with all
Yeah.
the ISRC codes, and all the tracking for the royalties and all that sort of stuff. And I'd got this idea that I could, like, put another little idea into the CD code, which I only thought of when I was doing the artwork, which was about a year after we'd mastered the audio. So then I've got masters with the wrong code on them. So I then had to figure out a way to change the DDP file, which when I spoke to Bill, he'd just moved house. His computer was in cardboard boxes in the garage. It's like, you couldn't
Right.
have wrote it, you know, just CD company says, "Oh, just send us a new thing and like that'll be fine." Well, the guy can't do it because his computer's not set up. Oh, well, can you do it? Well, yeah, but we'll have to charge you for it. It's like 72 quid for a DDP file, just for them
Right.
to load my file in, change the code, press save, send it back, which I thought was a bit extortionate. But, and then as they'd sent me their new file, I thought, well, I don't know much about DDP files, so I'll send it to Bill. He can download a cheap, a free DDP player and look at it and analyze it and tell me if it's okay. And yeah, I sent it to him, and he's like, "No, there's weird things in this file that don't really add up. I just give me a few days. I'll get the computer out. I'll sort it." Because it's his name on the line as well. It's his
Yeah.
production, so he wants the file to be right. And that took another extra bit of time. And there's a thing with, like, the logo, which I know this will be audio, but like you can see that the logo's orange on in the
Yeah.
corner. It's supposed to be white, but they wrote to me saying the white might not come out as you expect it, so we urge you to put a big black line around it. It's supposed to be as if you don't see it, like almost you'd miss it, sort of thing. So anyway, I said to them, "All right, just drop a tiny little bit of what color, like yellow or pink or whatever, just to make it legible, just so that it passes your criteria." What did they do? Ink dropper, go onto the back, find a dark orange color and use that instead. And I was just like, you're not even listening to what I said.
I mean, these are the things that you don't realize when you start putting an album together, because so the DDP and all those things. So when you've recorded the individual songs, but then it's got to be sort of queued up on the album, and then you've got to decide like how much pause between each track, you know, like
Yeah,
how
well, that
that's
was the
queuing
thing.
as
I
well.
mean,
And then when you have the artwork done, it's done probably on a computer, and then or it might be like painted physically and then scanned in, and then it's got to be sent over in the correct file format, and then it's printing that physically is slightly different to viewing it. So there's like when I had an album done, so the artist was like a friend of a friend who did some really cool stuff, and then the CD company were like, we need it in this file format, or it needs to be like, it's not like red, green, blue, is it? It's like cyan, magenta, yellow.
CMYK, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's got to be like transferable between those formats. So like even if you've like done the artwork and recorded the songs, there's still all that kind of like jigging around of all the elements to then get it ready to be made into a physical CD.
Yeah, I mean, what was always going to be the case for this album is that there's going to be two different versions of it. This version that I have right now is the pre-release version, I suppose, because the logo is the wrong color. The artwork is, when I look at the booklet, like the colors they're not popping vibrantly. And I think that could be something that if I go back to Anna and we can just brighten up the color scheme and stuff and change it and modify it a bit and then put the logo in the right color. And then the second one will have like the barcode on the back corner as well. And that's how it'll be identifiable as well. The main copy that I hope to use for the rest of my indefinite life, I suppose, will be the barcode version. But this version is the tester version, I suppose, really.
Yeah, I did that for mine as well, because the album cover was basically like red, white, and black colors, and they sent me like a sample CD through, and the colors just didn't pop. So then I went back to the artist and said, like, can you make it really more vibrant, because it doesn't quite translate through print. And they sent another one. I was like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But it's, again, you don't quite know until it's been physically made, and there's also physical limitations with the printing mechanisms and these kind of things as well. So it's,
and that's one of the things. I mean, they also said that, like, in the inside, in like the thanks page or what have you, that you can see it's basically like a black background with white text on it, and there's lots of small text. So it's like they said the text should be minimum 5 pitch, and we used 5.2, and they still warned me saying that you might not be able to read it. I was like, wow.
I need to be able to read it.
Well, yeah, and of course, like, it's come through and it's perfectly legible. There's nothing wrong with it at all. And I think the other one was like the CD itself is like, you wanted the silver writing to be like the transparent nature of the disc rather than an ink on top. And they warned about that, but that's worked out fine as well. So, yeah, the only thing that I didn't realize is that I think I've got my website wrong on the CD.
Oh, God.
Although it's not like the most important thing. I realised that it's not actually www.steveling.uk. It's actually just steveling.uk. It's not the biggest problem in the world, but.
So, how's it feel? I mean, it might be different for me. Like after that, like just to physically hold the CD.
Well, yeah, it's been an ongoing saga that a lot of my friends and family have been aware of for like the last however many years, and are all just tired of it dragging on, really. But
it's 8 years. That's 2 Olympics.
Well, I was thinking of it in a different way, because like being previously a guitar teacher and stuff, I thought it might be nice to go around GCSE music departments and give each, well, not every single one, but at least one in Sheffield where I went, and maybe Norfolk where I worked to start with, give them the CD and maybe do an assembly as well. Like, and can you imagine saying to a high school student, can you think of a project that is longer than all of your time in high school, both years of college, and the first year of university?
Or if they're GCSE students, like this is literally half your lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just think to put it in that perspective would be quite interesting for a 15, 16-year-old or something like that.
Especially, I don't want to tar all teenagers with the same brush, but obviously they're now grown up in an environment where music is free and instantly accessible, which can be great, but then it's very devalued. So they say, look, you probably imagine that, like, Rihanna rocks up and she's a big studio, the record company's paying for it, and stuff gets done and money happens, but like, here's what it can be like on another level. Like, this is the process, and it's very personal and individual, but like this blood, sweat and tears went into this, so it's not just like, oh, here's a song. Like, there's a lot that went into this.
I would hope that the musical landscape, like you're referring to, the world of free, I think it will write itself eventually. Everything always does. Like, you get to the point where we grew up through the Napster, the LimeWire era, where when you got it for free, there was a problem that came with it, and you understood that you were taking a risk to your
Yeah.
computer by using LimeWire. Whereas now, LimeWire has become Spotify, and actually now the quality's fine, and there's no virus risk, and actually you're paying for the privilege. So
Yeah.
the risk has gone, but the free has remained. And I do feel that the vibe is there, that everybody knows that the music that's coming out of the charts at the moment is kind of not as good somehow. I don't know how you describe it in what specific way, but it just doesn't feel as good as the music from other decades. Like, you could even see it by like the covers gigs, you know, playing in a pub at the weekend, and the manager of the pub tells me that she likes the songs that I play because a lot of the time I'm playing songs from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I'm not just doing modern songs like Justin Bieber and Dua Lipa and Jess Glynn and all this other sort of stuff. It's like,
there's less to get into, isn't there? There's less detail on those songs a lot of the time,
well,
especially when you strip
yeah,
it down to acoustic level.
I think even if you kind of go away from the actual mechanics and building blocks of the song, as to going back to, like we say, like the lyrical meanings, like from before, like if a song has been written to sell, a lot of the time the lyrics are quite impersonal. Like, they don't feel attached to one person. It could be applying to anyone, and therefore if
It's
it's
got to have mass
general,
appeal, yeah.
yeah, if it's a bit general, then it feels like it can be more disposable. And a lot of those songs from those key decades, the 60s and 70s, I think they just they didn't realize at the time that they were riding this magical ride that was working and firing on all cylinders for so many people. Like, it wasn't just rock bands, it wasn't just Bon Jovi and Metallica and, you know, all those shreddy sort of things. There was ABBA and, you know, like Chic and all the other different genres of guitar based bands that were seeming to enjoy success because they were recording with people and with instruments. And now it seems even like my album is modern in a way that it's one man and a drummer to create all of this. It's not like four guys in a room recorded playing together,
Yeah.
although that's what I've tried to simulate as much as possible, that each instrument is its own personality, and the bass player might be different to the acoustic guitar player. But whether that effect comes across, because you know there's only one guy doing it all. You haven't got the Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction like imagery, you know, the
Yeah.
back cover where they're all just sat around hanging out at the studio or what have you. So I don't know. I think there is, yeah, it's a strange time, and to combat that world of free and go, well, yeah, but if we all know things are rubbish now, well, then why are we going to keep doing the same things as we're doing now? Because it's obviously not working.
I think, like you said, things are starting to right because people are more interested in the provenance of the food, you know, like more organic stuff or eating locally, like ethically sourced things like food, clothing, generally being a bit more sort of conscious of where things are coming from. So, yeah, maybe you're right that things are moving gradually in that direction. There's obviously still going to be a market for like mass produced stuff because sometimes people just want a McDonald's, you know,
Yes,
or
yes,
things.
exactly.
It'll always be there.
It'll always be there. But I think it'll get to the point where, rather than this trend of everybody going to McDonald's because all of a sudden it seems like the right thing to do, there's going to be people going, yeah, but GBK is way better, isn't it? I know it costs a bit more, but like, it is way better.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, people are willing to pay 15 quid rather than 5 or 7.99 or whatever it is. And it's that psychological shift of the cheap thing. Yeah, we recognize it's cheap, but the expensive thing is better, you know? So I think that is going to be, you know, where it goes essentially. And for me at least, I've taken 8 years of my life. I've spent that much money and earned nothing from it for it so far, and it feels like I've got to give myself some chance to earn something from it. And even seeing other Guitar Institute drum tech teachers, I saw a post from Pt.2 the other day saying, does anybody know how I remove my music from Spotify? Because I'm not going to make a dime, if while ever it's up there. So everybody knows that that's what's going on, but musicians don't make money while it's up there, but you can listen to it for free. So if the people are starting to go, well, I'm not going to make anything while it's there. Yeah, let's pull it down. Then all the good stuff gets removed from the platform, and you're left with a platform with just the dregs, surely, by definition.
It's more of a like an advertisement, isn't it? Like people go there and they can find out about your music or experience that they wouldn't be able to find it otherwise. So it's like a free advert in
Yeah,
a way that
I
people
think
might not see.
there's something like that's changed us all since the MySpace days. Like, I don't know whether you'd agree, but a lot of my musical mates agree that like MySpace was like the pinnacle of where social media kind of joined and met real life. Because yeah, while we were at the Guitar Institute, it was all about having your top eight and who's in your top friends or what have you. But there was a player with 4 tracks, and I bought CDs off bands on MySpace. You click on the thing and then send it through, pay the postage, and bam, they're the CDs in your house. And it felt like that was a good thing. The band put the demo up and you could buy it. What's not to love?
I think a lot of times as well, it was often like people you met and you knew personally as well. So like you'd use that and you'd go to gigs, from bands you'd listen to on MySpace, and we used it as our like online demo to get gigs around London and things. And then people would contact us through there. It's a different time. I mean, that was like almost 20 years ago. So it's
Yeah. And now it's changed into like the Spotify thing of if your first 5 seconds are not good enough, then good luck getting anywhere. It's like music's not about that. Like all you have to say is "Shine on You, Crazy Diamond," and then that puts an end to that argument for me. Like, would you tell David Gilmour, just forget that first 7 minutes, come straight in at the verse?
yeah.
No, you wouldn't. It's like, I just think that if you're going to be bound by the platform and write your music to sell or to be more popular on a platform for specific reasons,
Which people
do, I think you're cutting your own experience somehow. You kind of just not, I don't know, it just seems like you're more for the platform rather than the art, let's say.
Yeah, it'd be like just making cheap, easy food to sell, but not really caring about the content of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, this idea that I've been kind of putting around a bit, like more recently, is forget about music for a second. Let's change the MP3 or the song to a toy. It's like a Toys R Us situation. So imagine that the manager of Toys R Us comes up to you and your family or what have you, whether you're the kid or the adult, I don't know, and they say, so you can come in here and play with any toy that you want, whether it's open or boxed or new or used or whatever. Just play with any toy you like. Just come here and pay us £10 like every week or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And while ever the store's open, you can come in and play on the aisle, wherever it is, like make a mess or whatever it is. And you can try any toy you want, and the kids are like, "Whoa, that's brilliant!" Just trying things left, right, and center. The parents are happy, the kids are happy. So cut to the phone call. The phone rings. Manager picks his phone. Hello, it's like, oh, this is so and so from Tomy, or insert another toy brand here. And it's like, oh, so what's the response to the new toy? Oh yeah, kids love it, brilliant. Oh, yeah, it's going down really well. Oh, that sounds great. So how many sales have you got for this month? 0. Yeah, but you said they loved it. Well, yeah, but you haven't sold any. Well, these are like 60 quid a remote control car or whatever. How can you have not sold anything? Like, oh, well, we just let the kids play with it for free in the shop.
And then we
That
take the
is
money.
Spotify, isn't it? And it doesn't work in toys. The company would not have it. Just like, no, you're not letting a 60 quid product be played with for free. I'm sorry, that's just not how it works. But in music, we apparently need to be that desperate to go, put it everywhere. Just please listen to it. Listen to it on mute. I don't care. It's like, that's what we've become as a I guess a demographic of people. I've seen more than one person post something, words to that effect, saying, please click on my YouTube video. I'm nearly at 50,000 views. If you could just click it and just put it on in the background, whether you watch it or not, I don't care. That's just soul destroying to me. Like, have you no self-worth?
It's yeah, because when I hit that algorithm, get some more views, and then that can translate into real money eventually down the line. But it's
I guess it can, but like, I don't want to be a social media person. I don't want to work for YouTube. I don't want to work for Instagram or TikTok. I don't. In that way, if you're constantly uploading to social media, it's like being an employee at Toys R Us. You're just going there to help kids do what they need to do. And
it is, but at the same time, it's a tool that you can use. Obviously it goes both ways. So like you can just use it for your own gain. You have to put time and effort into it, or get someone to manage that for you. But then it is a way. Like I think it was Pt.2 was a well-known guitar player, was saying to me when it's like, oh look, I'm going to do a TikTok video or Instagram, or like a blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, I understand your career has done well, but for someone coming up, at least it's another option that they can use to start things, so it's, yeah, I kind of view Instagram as a bit of a necessary evil, because I can use it to promote things, although I'm not desperately keen on the platform, but then I can use it, so
the one thing that
it's a
has to
tool.
be said, and I don't know where you stand on this, but for me, since I've lessened my use of social media, Instagram and Facebook, my general mental health has improved no end.
Yeah, I generally like I said, I try to use it rather than have it use me, and obviously people have varying degrees of that.
That's a good way of saying it.
But yeah, so many people are just glued to their phones, and even just the other day, just some woman, she's walking a dog, just like looking at the phone, like you're not in the moment, and like I was, I think, 18 when I got my first phone, and by that point it was like text only and phone calls. You could only store 10 texts, but like even now, like in social situations, I try to like just keep the phone in the pocket and like just interact with people more, and like sometimes the phone does come out or needs to or whatever, but try and like really minimize that, and like just look people in the eye, like talk to them, like
Yeah,
we can take a couple of pictures, yeah, but like just be here, like don't like, oh, gotta scroll
But
and
this
like
is
put it
it. I
on
think
Instagram.
it's blended into something else for me. Like, I'm a lover of this. I think it originally comes from like Newton's laws of motion. I think was it every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? Did you do physics at college
Yeah,
at all?
that's is that the first law of thermodynamics?
One of them, anyway.
Yeah,
And I like it because it works in music as well, like in a weird way. Like the the lightest note of Lydian is the darkest note of Locrian, the sharp four, flat five effect.
that's
In it.
interesting.
So when you lay them all out like we would have known, going Lydian, Ionian, Dorian, then what, Aeolian, Phrygian, Locrian. I'm sure I missed Mixolydian. I missed Mixolydian out. But that kind of going from light to dark in a scale sense is that the most interesting note of the Lydian scale is the sharp four, which would be F sharp if it was C Lydian. But then in C Locrian, the darkest scale, the most interesting note is the same interval, the flat five.
I was thinking about that. Just yeah, we're going to go all theory. But, like in each mode, it's generally like the flat five that drives it. So you've got in Phrygian, yes, you've got the flat two and the
Flat
fifth,
two and the fifth, yeah.
and then Lydian you've got the root and the sharp four, and then in Dorian you've got the minor third and the natural
And
six.
the
So
six, yeah.
it's that tension. It's the flat five that drives the tension.
Mm. And I think there's something that I've just let my sort of bumbling brain turn that sort of theory into other things, where it feels like things that are designed to be good often end up being really bad. And I mean the internet with this one. It was designed to help us and make things better for us, but all it's done is turn us into a bunch of people who can't remember anything and don't know how to socialize anymore.
There have been some benefits. I mean, things like scientific collaboration, and there's many things, ways that the internet does connect. But yeah, like I
But
mean,
in
if
the
you said to people
majority of
like, yeah,
senses,
if you said to someone 100 years ago, like, you're going to have a device in your pocket that can communicate anywhere in the world, download almost anything among human knowledge, and you're going to use that to look at pictures of cats, and start arguments with strangers. Like this would get mostly what people use their phone for, or just posting another photo of themselves, like, oh, here's me doing this with my hand. Like.
Yeah, I mean it. I had this kind of conversation with my mum and my dad, and I like to kind of find out where they think modern life is at the moment. And like I showed him a video. I think his name is it Joey Z, something like that, Tunes or something, a YouTuber guy. And he's one of these guys who just hates modern people who are just on their phones, phone zombies, all that sort
Yeah.
of thing. And he did this half an hour rant about just the girls who get all the cosmetic surgery to look good on Instagram, and then like they get millions of followers on Instagram, but you see them walking through Westfield or whatever, say hello, and they just like run a mile because they're so scared of everything. And my mum was like, this just seems unrecognizable to my childhood. That's what she said.
Yeah, and ours. Yeah.
And I feel that this wave of having grown up with the internet, and like, I guess, when did the internet really become apparent for us? It must have been sort of during the end of high school, maybe.
Yeah.
Like year 10, year 11, maybe. You definitely didn't have a phone in your pocket that could go on the internet, but there were computers in the classroom that you could go on to.
If you look up a
What was
bus
it?
timetable, that's about it.
Yeah, or something rubbish like that. But it wasn't like so important. Like, you didn't see people taking pictures of themselves on the way to the bus stop. You just didn't.
One thing, like, because I'm sure it is in other fields as well. I'm not an expert in other fields, but like with music, like people are getting better because of the internet. Like there's access to so much learning and so much resources that you get young kids that are coming up with like staggering abilities, and
I agree. I
things
do
are
agree.
progressing like that. There's and some people are saying like, oh yeah, but they should have taken a lot longer to learn. I was like, yeah, but they all just do it quicker. So like, why not? And then the next generation that can then take it into some like stratosphere, like where like Jacob Collier is heading with all his crazy stuff or whatever. So it's interesting that things are advancing like that.
I don't know where you would weigh in on this though, but that's great, and I agree that that's great that learning via YouTube and Google and whatever else has helped people learn instruments and languages much more quickly. But for guitar players, at least, it's changed the landscape from wanting to grow up and be the next Slash, the next Paul Gilbert, the next Dave Mustaine, the next whoever it is, um, to then becoming, oh well, my hero's a guitar teacher, not a performer. Like, so I want to be a YouTube guitar teacher. So I want to record cover versions and teach people how to play songs. And I feel that a lot of people gravitate towards uh, recording themselves and putting it online as quickly as possible, rather than, say, doing something like I've done, which is one product in 8 years, rather than, I don't know, 8 videos a week.
I think as well, yeah, because sometimes you can just be like a content whore, so to speak. You just like, or content factory, just knocking it out.
Yeah.
Whereas, like some people are saying like, oh, like the album's dead and things. You just put out singles, but then the best songs on an album are often not the singles. And also, you like, I just want to have a snapshot of this time. Like I've got more to say, than just like what you'd cram into a single, and it's formulaic structure. So you want to like just really stretch that. And some of my songs have been like maybe like broadly single structure, and it's like verse chorus bridge, but that might be over like 6 minutes with like time changes and all this kind of stuff in it. So it's like there's more in there. I want to say more. Like I don't want to just hit the singles just for sales and say, oh, I got a bit more attention, or this single got this many plays or this much recognition, because
But this is
it's
it. I
less,
think
it's
this,
watered down content, isn't it, essentially?
yeah, and this goes into I think a deeper sort of situation of, well, where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a mainstream artist? Do you see yourself as an underground artist? Do you see yourself as someone who wants to be known for who you are rather than what your work is? Or like, I didn't know what Slash's voice sounded like until I saw him on Top Gear.
Yeah, good point.
I had no interest of what his accent was, or Axl Rose or any of the other ones. I mean, I'd been to see Paul Gilbert at a guitar clinic in Doncaster as a kid and really enjoyed that, because you felt like it was a special event that, like, not everyone knew about. You were in that clique of like guitar geek nerds that bought the magazine and knew about the thing because it was advertised in the magazine, and you got the free CD, and then all the guitar players kind of knew a bunch of stuff that lots of other people didn't. But the kind of globalization of YouTube and everything has meant that everyone knows everything now, and there's no local anymore. There's just chuck it on the internet, and you either like it or you don't.
It's different, isn't it? I mean, I'd love to be like in my early 20s, like in the mid 80s when all that kind of stuff was going on. But then, yeah, the internet does bring with all this massive information and exposure, like opportunities as well. So I think, would I have struggled more in the 80s? You know, like, I don't know. We'll never know, you know. But it's like the opportunities
I
here.
think the answer is yes. We would have struggled more because fewer people actually made it. But the people who actually made it seem to be better than the people who are making it now, even though more people can make it now.
Yeah, oh yeah, because I guess if more people are making it, then
And I guess you could even take it down the Christmas songs route. Like, I think the Christmas number one, like the ones that we all know and we all hate every December, like they came from a certain time period when people didn't know just how sellable things were until they figured out the formula, and then it was like, oh right, okay, just do the mid-tempo shuffle, sleigh bells, cool, yeah, we've got a Christmas song, brilliant, and it worked. And then they figured it out, and then after a certain point, you stop getting good Christmas singles. Like, what's the most modern Christmas song you can think of?
probably The Darkness.
When was that then? Was that about 2000?
No, that would have been about maybe 10 years ago. Time at the Bell's End.
Do you think it'll be a classic like Last Christmas, or
It's not going to be up there, but it's sort of like tagged onto the back of that. It's interesting, yeah, that girl I was listening to on the radio that I mentioned there, like writing the lyrics about the time and the green sweater. So she's actually working on a Christmas album, but like it's going to be really dark, which I quite like because it's so sickly at Christmas songs. And so this will be like, there's a song called something like, or line like, I don't want to be single on the 25th, and it's like really dark. Like, yeah, that's good. It's like really a twist on it.
yeah, I guess like they all are like that, aren't they? The ones that we all know, they're a bit twee and a bit like promoting the standard Christmas, isn't it? But well, I mean, how do you go forward from that? Do you go even further to say that the white Christmas is not really? We don't need snow. We've got warm world now, so Sweden hasn't got like the winter wonderland anymore or whatever it is.
It's, I mean, a lot of that's nostalgic, isn't it? And it just kind of gets knocked out every year. And I mean, Christmas music is generally some of my least favorite music out of all. And my idea of hell would be like Mariah Carey on repeat.
I'm sure it is for most people as well. Like, and for me too. Um, but they are probably some of the most high selling or high royalty earning songs in the world. Like, if you are
Yeah,
Noddy
because it's
Holder,
consistent. Yeah. Well, he gets that's about 500,000 a year, I think.
just from It's
Yeah.
Christmas, wow. See, that's the thing. But that was again from a time where sales actually translated into royalties. And I don't know how many people actually realize that Spotify, Netflix, YouTube don't actually provide royalties for the creators.
I
Like
think though,
that's
just quickly going back to that Noddy Holder one, because I mean it's used in things like, you know, like supermarket adverts and the general. I mean, because that was in the 70s, wasn't it? So that would be more our sort of like parents' generation, and then as that passes through and time goes on, it will be less relevant to people now, or like going forward. So I think even those kind of things will phase out.
yeah. Because I mean, do you find that you play Christmas songs around December when you're gigging, or do you get to the pub like I do
I
and you've
try
got
not
the
to.
song, you're ready to sing them if people want them, but you ask the people in the pub if they want a Christmas song, and everyone's like, "No, please don't," you know. And it's a bit of a weird thing because you're expected to play it, but the punters don't really want it unless they've like it's a Christmas party and you know it's an actual event. If you just go to the pub, it's just
Yeah, I mean I'm not that. Yeah, try and avoid Christmas music when I can. I mean New Year, like you do Old Lang Syne or something, but like Christmas songs, yeah, people. I mean, because yeah, so something like yeah, that Noddy Holder one, people would have nostalgically remember that to that time in their lives and that time in history, and like, but now people have different memories of Christmas. Or for me, like Mariah Carey's one, like it was really banded around when we were at college, so it was about 2004 or something, and I was living in a household. There was 7 of us. There was like 3 couples and me, and like there's like it's Christmas, and I was like, this is not a good time. So like I associate that with like pretty miserable, like, or like when that was on, I was like really feeling down about stuff. So and it's so sickly and mass produced. Like I can't get behind that song at all. So for me, it's got quite bad connotations. And then Noddy Holder, like I can't stand his voice. Like if it's like a jazz Christmas song, like yeah, that's okay. But like most Christmas music, I just, for various reasons, like makes me want to be sick.
I guess the only one that makes me think about, like you said about the being single on Christmas, the kind of negative side of it. I guess Last Christmas, the Wham song, is probably the one that comes closest out of the popular mainstream ones, isn't it? Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away, you bitch.
I was never really that into Wham and George Michael. It was only like later on when I really appreciated him as a singer. I'm like, oh, he's really, really good. So then I can appreciate him as an artist. And then at that Freddie Mercury concert, he did Somebody to Love, and I think he was the best performance on that day. So I was like, really appreciate him as a singer. So, but that Christmas single, it never really, obviously I was aware of it, but it never really got its hooks into me in any way.
See, for me, I didn't know anything of George Michael's music until Limp Bizkit introduced me to Faith.
Right.
So there's a cover version of Faith that they do, and the only difference is instead of it going B to E on the verse, it goes B to A. So I always do the Limp Bizkit version if I play it, like, and no one's noticed yet, but like, it's just my little thing. And Fred Durst screaming, "Gotta have fun" in the chorus, It's and then I found that like Faith is a staple in my acoustic set now, and like I'm thinking of other Wham and George Michael ones to do as well, because it really goes down well. And I actually had his Desert Island discs on the iPlayer radio the other day, and that is a very interesting read. What am I about? Listen, it was he's much more. I don't know, I give him a lot more respect now that I know more about him than I did from just hearing the songs on the radio at school or whatever. Especially in the 80s, I guess, for a bisexual / homosexual guy being in front and center in the 80s when that was a different time. That's what he speaks about, like, mostly in that interview. And you just sort of think, well, think about what's acceptable now. You wouldn't have any problem. You be yourself, mate. No one cares,
I think quite a telling thing was like after he died, like lots of stories came out about like quiet acts of kindness and charity, which was really nice because he just did that because, and then so when things like that come out, someone died, that really shows the character of the person, Obviously, he must have had his ups and downs. I'm not saying he was a perfect person, but like, I thought that was very good. And then when he was caught like in that toilet with the policeman and like had to come out, but then he just owned it. The next video, he was like just spinning toilets and he's in like dressed up as a policeman or something. He's like right, I'm going to own it. It's like respect,
Exactly, and this is what we like, isn't it? We like to see someone who's been shat on come out of it on top.
Getting absolutely baked and driving into that Snappy Snaps camera shop, like classic. Do you know, I would have loved to have been working there, you'd have got there, like, what happened to the shop? Mate, you're never going to believe this. Well, someone drove into it, but who was it? It was George Michael. Right, who was it? No, but he was high as a kite. It was George Michael drove into our shop. The best day at work ever.
So, yeah, it'd be Pixar, it didn't happen now, wouldn't it? But, yeah, it's, I guess, getting back to it, there's a lot of great influences, like, of these other artists that have kind of boiled through into the songs for me. Like I was saying about the influencers ripping off styles, not actually ripping off chords and stuff. I'm wondering whether I might make a list about this album, like every single influence that I've knowingly put in there. Like one of them is that it's on track 2, yeah. Novia, and there's a drum fill that's just drums where the guitar's cut out and it's like a 1 bar drum fill just as a break between a chorus. And I found it's actually an identical fill to that's involved in a Korn track.
Okay.
Like, really obscure album track that's not like a single or anything. And it just happens to be at a similar tempo and it's exactly the same drum fill. And I knew it was poignant in some way, but it actually, there's some of the influences were like, I definitely know what I'm doing. I'm taking this thing and using it here.
Yeah.
And other ones were like that one where I'd done it all. And then about a year after, like once I'm mixing it, hear the song that it's come from and go, that's where that came from then. So I'm not averse to sort of saying, yes, there's a lot of this other band in this song, but you can't just say that one drum fill I've ripped off a Korn song.
Yeah, and it's interesting to use the word poignant as well, because like maybe that was the feeling you had subconsciously associated with that Korn thing, and then you wanted that, not necessarily the drum fill, but that was like only the mechanism for it to happen. So that's what you tuned into, and then put that into it, and that's where it came from. But there's a reason for that.
I mean, one of the obvious influences is later on in the album, and I'm hoping that Avril Lavigne herself might hear the song one day. But yeah, it's quite a. I don't want to use the word blatant because that implies that I'm lazy or didn't try in some way. But I'd had her first album on the night before, and then the day after I was writing a song, and it was very heavily influenced by one of her songs. And I thought about ways as to how I can manipulate or modify this so that it's not a direct rip-off and it is just an influence. And so essentially the chord progression is the same.
Yeah, like you want to take something of that and then mold it into something different.
Yeah, and originally I'd written it in the same key as well. So I decided to change the key a little bit, move it down so it sounded different in my head. But then once I'd written the vocal melody to it, the vocal melody is completely different. So soon you hear the guitar come in for the intro, and you're like, oh, hang on a minute, this sounds a little bit like, oh, and then it's just gone because it's a different vocal melody.
Nice, yeah.
So I do wonder whether that'll get banded around like the Ed Sheeran Dua Lipa thing, where it's like, oh, that's just a rip off. Well, no, it isn't. It's not the same vocal melody. It's it's an influence. So I don't know how many of those I've actually got, but I reckon it could go up to at least 30, maybe 40 different individual spot influences across the album.
Yeah, I wonder like how many I've done on my releases, but then some of my stuff is pretty weird, and I mean, you can say that I want to be different and deliberately doing weird stuff, but yeah, there's kind of standard building blocks and things, isn't there? Where it's like, well, that was used on a lot of different things, and I'm not going to just avoid stuff that works just because it's been used a lot because it works.
I mean, the other thing that's kind of geeky and I guess niche knowledge surrounding the writing of the songs is that I tried to connect every track harmonically.
Oh, okay.
So I guess whether it like feels like a song is like the second movement of the previous song because it's in a similar key or a related key, or one of them finishes on an E chord and then the next song comes straight in at C sharp minor and it's in the same general tonal center. One of them was like a definite semitone shift from like E minor to F minor and it creates a certain effect. Some of them are like a fourth away. They're all still in the related keys in something. So that's again why it feels annoying to me that one might just listen to 2 of the tracks off the album or download 2 of the tracks and not listen to it in order or something, because the order has been purposely put there.
Yeah.
Track 1 is track 1 because it goes before track 2. If you listen to it as track 13, then why would you listen to the first chapter right at the end?
Yeah, I've got a concept album where I've done that and had like repeated themes, but sometimes just deliberately like had it completely different from the next song because like, well, that's where that cuts off. Now it's in part of the story. So yeah, using both. Yeah, I might release that next year. That album called Karma for Dogs. It's
oh yeah.
there's three characters. There's a postman, a stressed out neighbour, and a little dog, and they're stuck in this like reincarnation cycle until they can break out of their problems, but they're all linked. And it's like this concept of like the whole story together. So a bit weird.
Well, interested to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote that about 2007, a while back, but it's some cool stuff in there. All right, so yeah, I think it's a good time to wrap it up. Otherwise, we'll be talking all night.
God, it's 9:30. Yeah.
It's yeah, been cool talking to you. I've been really interested to hear this album now. I've been discussing it, and also I've heard some of your other material, and I know you're a person, so it'd be quite interesting to see how that's developed and how that's been processed.
Definitely, and I would be interested to hear the difference now between. Well, I guess I'll send you a copy of the album at some point in the next week or so, and then you can start having a listen to it, and then some point in the future we'll do another one where you know the songs now and see if you have any different questions or anything.
Yeah, and see what my take on it is. And but generally, what's the kind of style? I mean, it's probably different styles within it, but what's the general kind of vibe music?
General style, I would market it as pop rock.
Okay, it's a guitar-based pop rock.
It's guitar-based band. It's mainly songs written on acoustic guitar, but there's an element of heaviness that runs through the whole album. But yeah, I guess pop music mainly, but rock as a background, and just hinting to a lot of other popular styles out of, I guess, pop, rock, country, blues, electronica, stuff that usually has guitars in it, but I guess, yeah,
nice.
The electronica component, not so much, but yeah.
Cool, and we'll put any relevant links in the show notes, and if people want to find you or not.
Like you were saying last time about social media, well, like the thing that I have now is a website, and I've found a way to host my tunes on my website and ensure that they're not available to listen to anywhere else.
Cool. So do you want to give that website address out?
So that is just steveling.uk. And I found that if you put www. before it, sometimes it works as well, but I don't think it is. It's just steveling.uk.
Awesome. Well, cheers, Steve, and we'll speak again soon.
Indeed. Nice one.
Outro music. Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.